The story of the Shroud of Turin is often told through the lens of faith, but its most chilling secrets have been revealed through the cold, hard lens of technical photography and forensic biochemistry. It began in 1978 with a man named Barry Schwarz. Schwarz wasn't a mystic or a theologian. He was a high-level technical photographer who worked with agencies like NASA, a man used to looking at the world through light spectrums and resolution counts. When he was invited to join the Shroud of Turin research project STURP, he was a through-and-through skeptic. As a Jewish man with no stake in Christian miracles, he joked with his colleagues that they were on a free vacation to Italy. He was convinced he would find brushstrokes, pigment, or the clever hand of a medieval forger within hours. But the moment he stepped into the room with the linen cloth, a piece of fabric roughly 14 feet long and 3 feet wide, the atmosphere shifted. He wasn't looking at a painting. He was looking at a forensic crime scene frozen in time. One of the first tests the STURP team conducted involved a piece of technology that changed everything: the VP-8 image analyzer. At the time, NASA used this analog computer to convert two-dimensional photographs of planetary surfaces into three-dimensional topographic maps. When you put a standard photograph of a person into a VP-8, the result is a distorted, melted mess because photographs don't contain depth data. However, when the team fed Schwarz's high-resolution photos of the shroud into the machine, a perfect, anatomically correct three-dimensional human shape emerged on the screen. This was physically impossible for a painting. It proved that the image on the cloth contained spatial information, the distance between the fabric and the body it once wrapped. The cloth was essentially a 3D data record created 2 millennia before the invention of the computer. As Schwarz spent 120 hours straight examining every fiber, he discovered something even more perplexing. The image of the man is not in the cloth. It is only on the very surface of the topmost fibers. If you take a human hair and split it into 100 longitudinal slices, the image on the shroud is thinner than one of those slices. It is measured in micrometers. There is no soak-through. If you look at the back of the cloth, there is no image. This immediately ruled out any form of paint, dye, or chemical vapor, which would have naturally bled into the porous linen. Scientific journals later confirmed that the image was created by a process of oxidative dehydration of the cellulose in the fibers. In layman's terms, the top layer of the cloth was scorched by a burst of high-frequency energy, a flash of light so intense and so brief that it changed the chemical structure of the linen without burning a hole through it. To this day, we do not have a laboratory laser or light source that can replicate this effect over such a large area. For nearly 20 years, Schwarz held onto one last shred of skepticism: the blood. The stains on the shroud were a vibrant crimson red. Anyone who has ever seen an old bandage knows that blood turns brown or black as it ages and oxidizes. For Schwarz, this was the smoking gun of a forgery. He thought an artist had simply used red paint to make the wounds look dramatic. That changed when he spoke to Alan Adler, a world-class biochemist. Adler explained that the red color was actually a terrifying proof of authenticity. When a human being undergoes extreme physical trauma, hours of beating, dehydration, and intense pain, the liver begins to fail and floods the bloodstream with a chemical called bilirubin. Bilirubin acts as a permanent red stabilizer. If a man died in a state of absolute physiological shock, his blood would remain red on a fabric forever. Laboratory tests confirmed the presence of human hemoglobin and albumin. There were no pigments. It was real blood. And it was the blood of a man who had been tortured to the limits of human endurance. The shroud isn't just an image, it reads almost like a medical report from a Roman execution. And the level of forensic detail it contains is so precise that it goes far beyond what people in the medieval period were believed to understand. Across the man's back and legs, there are more than 100 lash wounds. And these aren't random cuts. Their shape closely matches the marks left by a Roman flagrum, a brutal whip fitted with small lead balls that would rip into flesh with every strike. In most medieval paintings, Jesus is shown with nails driven through his palms, but the shroud tells a different story. The wounds appear in the wrists. Modern anatomy explains why this matters. A nail through the palm wouldn't be able to hold the full weight of a human body, it would simply tear through. But a nail placed through a small gap in the wrist, known as the space of destot, would actually lock the hand in place and support the body during crucifixion. There's also a large wound in the side that appears to have been inflicted after death. Its size and shape closely match what you would expect from a Roman lancia, the spear carried by Roman soldiers. And then there's another detail that stunned researchers. Near the feet area of the cloth, scientists discovered microscopic traces of travertine limestone, a very specific type of stone. Even more striking, it matches a rare variety commonly found in the tombs around Jerusalem. In other words, the cloth doesn't just document a man's suffering. It also points to a very particular place at a very particular moment in history. While the physical and chemical tests carried out in the 1970s and 80s had already stunned the scientific world, the real shock came decades later. With the rise of modern genetic sequencing in the 21st century, researchers suddenly had tools that earlier investigators could only dream about. In recent years, a team of geneticists led by Gianni Barcaccia at the University of Padua conducted a detailed DNA analysis using dust and microscopic biological material that had previously been vacuumed from the Shroud of Turin. Their goal seemed simple enough: identify the genetic traces left behind on the cloth and see who they belong to. At first, the scientists expected something relatively straightforward. Maybe the DNA would point to a medieval European artisan, someone who might have created the relic centuries ago. Or perhaps it would reveal genetic traces from high-ranking clergy who had handled the cloth throughout its long history. But that's not what the results showed. Instead of a single genetic origin, the data looked more like a global mosaic of human history. When researchers examined the mitochondrial DNA, known as mtDNA, they discovered genetic markers from populations scattered across the ancient world. Some sequences matched lineages common in the Middle East, particularly haplotypes consistent with people from the Levant regions corresponding to modern-day Israel and Palestine. Others pointed toward North African ancestry, including rare markers associated with certain nomadic tribes. But the most surprising discovery was something few expected to see at all: DNA markers typically found in populations from South Asia, particularly the Indian subcontinent. At first, skeptics had a quick explanation. Over the centuries, millions of pilgrims had traveled to see the shroud. Many of them touched it, some kissed it. Naturally, that kind of contact could leave behind traces of DNA from people all over the world. But there was one detail that complicated that explanation. These genetic sequences weren't just sitting on the outer surface of the cloth. Researchers found them embedded within the linen fibers themselves, and even inside the ancient bloodstains. That discovery suggested the material had absorbed biological traces much earlier in its history, long before modern tourism or large-scale pilgrimages. One interpretation is that the cloth may have traveled through regions connected by ancient trade networks, routes that would later be known collectively as the Silk Road, bringing it into contact with people from many different parts of the world. And then the investigation took an even stranger turn. Some geneticists who privately examined the blood samples reported that the DNA fragments did not entirely behave like typical ancient DNA. Normally, when genetic material ages for centuries, the double helix breaks down in very predictable ways. Scientists can usually trace those degradation patterns with remarkable accuracy. But according to these reports, certain sequences found in the shroud's bloodstains appeared fragmented or incomplete in ways that didn't follow the usual pattern. To a few researchers, that raised an unsettling possibility. If the image on the cloth was created by some kind of sudden energy event, as some theories suggest, then that same event might also have affected the genetic material itself at the molecular level. In other words, whatever process burned the faint image into the linen may have simultaneously altered the DNA within the blood, leaving it preserved in an unusual, almost frozen state. It's an idea that remains controversial, and many scientists remain cautious about drawing conclusions. But the deeper researchers dig into the shroud, the more the evidence refuses to fit neatly into ordinary explanations. And with every new test, the mystery seems to grow rather than shrink. Forensic analysis of the blood, type AB, is also a significant piece of the puzzle. While AB is the rarest blood type globally today, about 3%, it is significantly more common among certain populations in the Middle East. But the anomalies didn't stop at the blood type. When scientists looked at the chromosomal data, they found a profile that does not fit perfectly into any one modern racial category. The man on the shroud possesses a primordial genetic structure sequences that seem to predate the major ethnic shifts of the last 2,000 years. If this were a medieval forgery, the DNA would reflect the people of France or Italy in the 1300s. It doesn't. Instead, it reflects a man whose genetic footprint covers the cradle of civilization and beyond, suggesting a universal quality to his physical makeup that science cannot fully explain. The VP8 analysis we discussed earlier revealed something that many missed. The image is mathematically consistent with a body that was not resting heavily on a flat surface. In a normal burial, gravity would cause the hair to fall back and the muscles of the back and buttocks to flatten against the stone. But on the shroud, the hair is hanging down as if the man were upright or suspended, and the dorsal back image shows no signs of flattening. This has led physicists like John Jackson to propose the transparency theory. He suggests that at the moment of the image's creation, the body became transparent to the cloth, and the linen fell through the space the body once occupied. This would explain why the image is equally sharp on both the front and back, and why it contains 3D data that no 2D painting could ever replicate. Why haven't you heard more about this on the nightly news? The catch is that the scientific establishment is in a state of intellectual paralysis. Because the shroud breaks the laws of physics, specifically the law of conservation of energy, how can a cold body produce a blast of light? Many peer-reviewed journals simply refuse to touch it. The DNA evidence is particularly radioactive for mainstream science. If the DNA is truly anomalous, as some reports suggest, it challenges our fundamental understanding of human biology. Barry Schwarz spent his final years warning that the silence of the experts was the most dangerous part of the story. We live in an age where we can map the stars and decode the genome, yet we are humbled by a 2,000-year-old piece of burnt laundry. Hands down, it is the most sophisticated message in a bottle ever sent to the future. Conclusion: the bridge between worlds. The Shroud of Turin remains the ultimate challenge to human pride. It is a forensic crime scene that refuses to be solved by 21st century tools. The blood is real, the wounds are medically perfect. The 3D data is undeniable, and the new DNA results are suggesting an origin story that transcends our borders and categories. Whether you see it as the literal burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth or the most complex physical anomaly in history, one thing is certain: the shroud is a bridge. It bridges the gap between what we can see and what we can only wonder about. It acts as a mirror, reflecting our own technological limitations back at us. Schwarz started as a skeptic looking for a fake, but he ended as a witness to something he could only describe as the presence. Through his camera lens, he saw that the truth is often much stranger and much more beautiful than the lies we tell ourselves to feel safe. The mystery surrounding the Shroud of Turin remains a living puzzle. With every passing decade, our technology becomes more powerful and our tools more precise. Yet strangely, the shroud doesn't become easier to explain. If anything, the deeper scientists investigate it, the more complex it seems to become. And that raises a bigger question. What do you think all of this means? Do the unusual DNA findings point to something extraordinary, possibly even a divine origin? Or is this simply a scientific mystery that humanity hasn't solved yet? Another debate continues among researchers as well. Should the Catholic Church and the Vatican allow more invasive testing on the cloth to search for clearer answers? Or should the shroud remain protected and preserved exactly as it is? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might add a new angle to one of the most fascinating mysteries in history. And if you found this journey into the impossible shroud fascinating, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Digital Discovery. Here, we're not just telling stories, we're exploring the questions that refuse to disappear. Thanks for watching.